Just think about this for a second. Just take a step back when you think about this weekend and this game. It is in Las Vegas, Nevada. For so many years, the NFL and this commissioner talked about sports gambling and this city of Las Vegas, Nevada as a non-starter, as a almost like the third rail. The third rail or the second rail or the fourth rail? One of those I got it right. The third rail, right?
Third.
Yeah, I got it right. The third rail. And the idea... The third rail. That's where if you step on it, you're dead,
get fried.
basically.
You get fried.
You get fried.
It's powering a train to move on the subway track, or actually on land, but still.
Right.
There's a lot of volts going through there.
The third rail. And it was always like evil to them to ever talk about, to ever refer to. And here we are in this brand new world where not only is the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, but they're in bed with gambling.
Money, 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 money.
I mean, you watch these games now, and every 5 seconds, they're bringing up the different odds and the different things you can bet on.
And the number that they're predicting this weekend is ridiculous.
I think $1 billion, right?
No, 23.5 billion.
Oh, I was...
$23.5 billion is going to be gambled.
That's insane.
That's more than the NFL makes.
That's insanity.
NFL is a $20 billion business. It's $23.5 billion.
And that's why it's important to talk to this guy. And as much as I enjoyed doing the show with him for 2.5 years, I think what he did at 9:30 a.m. and still does on this station is probably more important. And that is talking about the pitfalls of gambling. And that is my guy, Craig Carton. Craig, what have you been up to? Like, are you doing TV or something?
Every now and then I do. I dabble. Oh, FS1 in the morning. Check it out.
No, I still check you out. Are you kidding me? I'm still loyal.
I'd be booked as a guest on the highly rated Tiki and Evan show. Certainly not me.
He didn't even put you first, Evan.
I know, he dropped me to 2 because he's so used to it. Well, you know what?
By the way, Tiki, that number is more like $60 billion when you count all like the office pools and the house parties and all that stuff.
Yeah,
and here's a better way to look at it. There's roughly 300 million people that live in this country, right?
Yep.
And the thought is that nearly a half of those people will wager on this year's Super Bowl.
Wow.
That is crazy.
Wow.
Start thinking about that.
Wow. Even if it's $1. Think how much money that is.
And what was that number, Craig, before, legalized sports gambling? Because people were always betting, but obviously it wasn't mainstream. It wasn't talked about. My grandfather used to do it all the time. I certainly remember. But what was that number in comparison like a decade ago?
So I'll give you better. The year before the widespread proliferation of legalized gambling, which obviously started in Jersey, and you'll be able to do it on your phone and all that, they thought the total handle would be in the neighborhood of $1.5 billion. So you're talking in a 5-year span, that number doing a times 30, 40.
Wow.
Because remember, when it came to gambling, now people like me gambled anyway. I mean, legal, illegal, whatever. I was a gambler, right? But there's a good portion of America that are only now gambling because it's legal.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people said, I might be interested in it, but I'm not going to do it because it's not legal. I can't do it. I don't want to book you. I don't want to deal with that nonsense.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's the mainstream accepted, pastime now is why so many more people are doing it.
Yeah. Craig, what is the sign that people should be looking for? Not the gamblers themselves, but say friends or family of some of these guys that might have a problem, or gals, to be honest with you.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's a great question because a lot of people don't have a problem. And to be fair, this is not to scare people. The far majority of people can gamble responsibly and do gamble responsibly. About 1% of the total amount of people that will gamble at all will present with a problem. And of those 1%, maybe 1% have the problem at the level, I had it. But the first thing you can look for in a friend or a loved one is how they change socially. Gambling, when done the way, people would like to do it, it should be fun. It should be recreational. It should be very social. You do it with your friends. You're at a party. You're all watching the same game. That type of thing. And, problem gamblers become loners. So when you see the kid that's no longer interested in dating or going to the house party or hanging out with his buddies or going to play golf or whatever the case is, a drink after work, and they're spending a lot of time by themselves, they can't separate their eyeballs from their phone because they're constantly in action looking for the next bet. Those are the first early signs for people to look at. And you'll know before anyone else knows if it's a friend that's just not acting, quote-unquote, normal the way he or she normally acts. And for people that have gambling problems, that's the first sign. They become more reclusive socially, and start shying away from the relationships that used to mean so much to them.
How do you, if you're by yourself, kind of realize I have a problem? Because that's a good way to know if it's your friend or it's a relative. Right. But if it's yourself, what's a sign that, all right, maybe I'm doing too much of this?
Yeah, so that's a loaded question because I was well aware that I wasn't gambling in a healthy manner, but I made conscious decisions not to stop.
Right.
So I can't say how many times I would look in a mirror and say, hey, dummy, stop. You shouldn't be betting the amounts you're betting, as often as you're betting. It's not smart to be in a casino as often as I was or looking for underground games or whatever the case may be. The issue is that when you get to a point in your life where now you've got the problem, rational thought escapes your brain because now all you care about is when am I going to gamble, how am I going to gamble, what kind of money am I going to gamble, where am I getting the money from, who do I owe money to, all those types of conversations. And at that point, you're in trouble because at that point, you're starting to shield yourself from the people that care about you. And many of us, myself included, become really adept at hiding the problem and lying about it.
Yeah.
Famously, you guys know, I sat next to the guys I sat next to for 10 years at the FAN. And while everyone knew I liked to gamble, nobody had any idea the lengths I was going to gamble.
Yeah. No, and I have a question about the NFL in a second, but like if you got in trouble for it, but a lot of people won't get in trouble for it. How do they stop? How do they get control over it?
Well, first, loving family and friends. And the hardest thing for the loving family and friends is not bailing them out. Yeah. Because when you bail them out, you've given them a free pass at it. And that's the hardest thing. And part of my life now, which I take great pride in, is I counsel younger kids, in their early 20s who now have gambling problems and talk to their families and do all that. Because the obvious answer is my son's hurting, I'm going to make him feel better. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to make him feel better by paying off his debt or helping him out. And while we're all going to do that because we love our kids and our friends and family, you just encourage them to do it again because you gave them a bailout. And that's the hardest part to tell a parent, that your son's going to have to figure this out. And you can aid him and walk him through it. And you can have meetings with the people you owe money to try to figure out a payment plan and all that. But at the end of the day, they've got to get out of it with your help. You can't just bail them out.
Yeah.
And one of the things you notice now with kids that are 18, 19, and 20, so in most states they're not of the legal age where they can gamble, because it's becoming so mainstream, there are parents out there that are setting up accounts in their names and allowing their kids to gamble through their name. And I have a good friend who's doing that now, and he asked me my thoughts on it, and I said my concern with that is when your son loses, he never has to pay the bill. So he has no idea what it's like to lose.
Yeah, it's like playing a video game.
Sense of the value of a buck.
Right.
And then you're going down a bad road. So I don't encourage that at all. And that's why what FanDuel did a number of years ago, which I heartfully endorse, they've created these opportunities for you to protect you from you, whether that's time limits. So if you are wagering on the FanDuel app, for example, you go and you make your wager and you turn it off. There's no reason to be on it for 6 hours a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can protect yourself against that kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And then the other two are wager limits, self-explanatory.
Right.
You put a cap on how much you're allowed to wager on any particular game, and deposit limits. So, you can only put $1,000 in a month, let's say, making up a number. And again, you protect yourself not just against losses, where a lot of people, especially immature gamblers, are now going to try to chase a bad loss by throwing money at the next game just because they want to get the money back, and you know where that's going to end up, but also against big wins. A good portion of problem gamblers, their journey started with a win.
Right.
And because they got a taste of winning, and boy, that's easy money,
right,
quote unquote, right?
And it feels good.
They start chasing the win like a drug addict would chase a high.
Well, I'll tell you what FanDuel did. I saw this the other day because I'm on FanDuel, is they put up how much I've deposited over like the last 2 years. And it was almost like reminding you, like the calorie count when you're shoving food down your throat. Hey, you could eat this, but look how many calories you've eaten. And I thought that was actually smart because I haven't even put that much money in my account, but seeing the number was like, oh, okay. I ain't putting any more in. I thought that was actually very smart to kind of remind you of how much you've put in to maybe slow you down a little bit.
Yeah, look, the reality is that if you do recreationally, it's entertainment, right? I'm going to spend $50 on a Broadway play, whatever the number is. So maybe I'm going to make tonight's ball game a pay-per-view event. And if that's where you leave it, no problem. You're not going to have a problem. You're doing it in a reasonable manner. It's when you're like, oh, I can't believe the Nets didn't cover. Oh, there's a West Coast game. I'm going to take that $50 and I'm going to put it on Portland, and then that loses.
Right.
And then you wind up, betting on dogs racing in Tijuana.
Let's hope not. Craig, I know you got a ton of connections everywhere, and now that you're a big TV star, and probably even more so, especially in the NFL. It's just a fine line, a little, shimmy, a little dance that they have going on with gambling. How are they managing or talking about this? Because it is a big issue. They have to know it is.
Oh, they know it is, but they, like every other Fortune 500 company in the world, they're powered by financial greed, right? Think about any time a player, and the laws, I don't want to get into too in the weeds on it, but the rules for players versus team employees are drastically different.
Yeah.
And I'll just give you an example.
Yeah.
If you're a player, the NFLPA has negotiated this with the NFL, you are allowed to wager on every sport other than the NFL. Okay, you're allowed to do it, okay? But you can't do it on team property, can't do it on the team bus, can't do it at the team hotel, can't do it at the facility, et cetera, et cetera. So if you got in your car and drove across the street to the local deli, you can put $50 on the Knick game. If you did it in the parking lot, you've now broken the law.
Yeah.
Or the NFL bylaws, I should say.
Yeah, you're going to get
Now,
suspended
if you're
6
a team
games.
employee, a non-player, you're a secretary with the New York Jets or New York Giants. You can't wager on anything. And if you do, you're immediately fired from your job. You're suspended or fired outright. So the rules are kind of ambiguous. And the issue is, take this year's Super Bowl. Obviously, it's in Las Vegas. There's an NFL team in Las Vegas. All well and good. The players in this year's Super Bowl cannot physically walk into a casino this week. If they do, they're not playing in the Super Bowl.
Wow.
Players that are not in the Super Bowl, but who are out in Vegas to celebrate, whether it's the Pro Bowl games or just been out there, for appearances and making money, et cetera, they're allowed to walk into the casino, but if they step foot in the sports book, they're suspended from next year in the NFL. Cannot play football.
Wow.
So it's those types of things
That's
that
dangerous,
get a little
man. That's
murky,
flirting with
right.
it's flirting with fire.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Sure. Even if you're not doing anything wrong.
Even if you
You're
could
putting yourself in harm's way.
unwittingly do it.
Yeah.
Right? Have a couple drinks, get lost a little bit. I mean, I'm barely joking.
Yeah. You remember years ago, when Tony Romo, when he was an active player with the Cowboys,
Right.
was supposed to have an appearance for a fantasy football thing in Vegas.
I remember this. I absolutely remember
the
this.
NFL came in and said you cannot make that appearance.
Yes.
So listen, it's the good part of gambling at the level it is now, from my perspective, having lived the life that I've lived, is that there are a lot of people who have always viewed gambling as a seedy kind of back alley type of thing, the mob and breaking kneecaps and hanging outside the track, that kind of thing. So the upside of this widespread legalization and proliferation of gambling is that, for example, your youngest kids, Teak, and your kids, Evan, and probably my grandkids, or maybe Anthony, I suppose, they will grow up where talking about gambling at the dinner table is mainstreamed and normal and acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, people who have a problem will now be much more likely to raise their hand and ask for help.
Right.
If you're a problem gambler, even 10 years ago, and you're viewed as a quote-unquote degenerate, which I can't stand that we put that adjective in front of the addiction, and a lot of people didn't know you were doing it, who's going to raise their hand and say, I've got a gambling problem, when most of society views gambling as a real dirty, ugly vice?
Yeah.
So I do think there's an upside to all this, which is 5 years from now, 10 years from now, your kids, God forbid they had a problem, but if they did, or if they had a buddy who had a problem, it'll be very normal to say, I need help, and ask for it.
Yeah, we're talking to Craig Carton, obviously longtime staple at WFAN. You may watch him on TV, the highly rated Carton Show on FS1. I was saying before, it's kind of crazy to think that we live in this world now. There's a Super Bowl in Las Vegas. You watch NFL games. We hear about the lines. We see it during commercial breaks. These are the lines now. These are the odds now. What would you guess this looks like 10 years from now? Because we've already seen the great change in 10 years. How about 10 years from now? Do you think we see more of it? Do you think it goes the other way and we see less of it?
No, I think it just grows and grows and grows. It's not disappearing ever. It's not going to go back to where it was. Even 5 years ago, you will have listen, you can do it on your phone in like 30 plus states now, but there'll be a gambling kiosk or a gambling bar in every stadium in America, every arena in America. There'll be far more inclusion as far as in-game wagering will become even bigger than it is, meaning I'm going to wager on every single play I wouldn't be surprised if there's a day when you walk into the Garden or Barclays or you name the stadium, and there's something at your seat in case you don't have access on your phone, which allows you to gamble right there in the moment. And I do hope, and I know from a FanDuel perspective, they've talked about this a lot, that if you kind of follow what took place in this country when it came to not drinking and driving, there was a time, let's just say 25 years ago, when it wasn't cool for me to ask you for your keys if I thought you had too much to drink, and I'd probably get in the car with you if you drove. And then there came this huge marketing campaign led by Mothers Against Drunk Drivers and groups like that to make it clear that it is really cool if you tell your friend, I'm not letting you drive drunk. Mm-hmm. And obviously, companies like Uber and Lyft coming into the fold make this a lot easier not to drink and drive. And I know from a FanDuel perspective, the goal is that we get to a place as quickly as possible where I think you have a problem and I'm your friend, and I do the cool thing, which is tell you to maybe not make that bet or talk to you about what you're doing and why you're making the bets you're making, so I can be there for you before you make a really bad decision, even if it's just a financial decision.
Yeah.
Like you said, not everyone that is a problem gambler winds up in prison.
Right.
Right? But it creates family drama, financial drama. And as much as we think we can just wake up the next day and it all gets fixed, it doesn't. It takes a long time to repair relationships that you damage.
No doubt. Now let's talk about your family, because late last week there were accusations made against your oldest son, Sonny Carton, that he was behind this football aggregator on Twitter, ML Football. And then after he denied that, it was almost left that it's not him, but it's Lucky Carton behind ML Football.
I dissected
That's
that.
what Tiki figured out. Now, as the father of these kids, who the hell's behind ML Football?
Who knows what their kids are doing these days? But I like the direction Tiki was going, and so I will say this, and I will help you out. I will confirm for you, ML Football is not Sonny Carton. I will confirm that it's not my daughter, Mickey Carton. I'll even help you out and tell you it's not the rock star of the family, Anthony Carton.
So it's Lucky Carton, who's never said more than 5 words.
Those are the ones you got to be careful about.
You're right. Craig, we appreciate it, man. Continued success with the TV. I'm glad you came on to talk about this. It's certainly important.
Thank you, bro. What was the process in booking me today?
Oh, God. You didn't even know. I booked you through FanDuel, and I was like, I wonder if Craig even knows he's coming on.
And it's funny, I went on WIP in Philly earlier today. Spike Eskin, big rock star in New York, and going to Philly.
Right.
And they're like, it took like 3 phone calls to get this done.
Oh, by the way, since you've been known to do multiple jobs, and I give you credit, you did both very well for a long period of time.
Somehow.
Do you want the WFAN PD job now that Spike's leaving us to go to Philly? Like, could you handle both TV in the mornings?
We're asking everybody.
Yeah.
There have been conversations.
I can imagine that. Lukey would freak out, by the way. He'd be very nervous if that
Our PD will be in at 10:30.
I said I would take the job if they agree to let Sonny replace Boomer.
Well, 3 more years, right? Isn't that pretty much what it is? Thank you, Craig. We appreciate it, man.
Appreciate you, Craig.
All right, talk to you.
There he is, the great Craig Carton, you can see on TV. But it's an important discussion because the Super Bowl is coming up in a couple days. Mm-hmm. And look, you just laid out the numbers. He laid out the numbers. You laid out the numbers.
His numbers are more sensible because it's not what we are counting.
Right.
It's what we're not counting.
Right.
That's even more so.
Well, I think we're now in a world, we talked yesterday about Super Bowl parties and where we watch the game and who we watch the game with. When I'm watching the game 10, 15 years ago, people would bet and people played the box game. I'm not saying it didn't exist, but nowadays, everybody.
And that box game is big.
The box game is big. It's
not like, I won $100.
No doubt.
It's a lot more than that.
It's big, and then the prop bets, and then just everything about the game. And gambling has become very prominent. And the thing I wrestle with, I have to admit, because I've always been like a libertarian at heart. I guess I am a libertarian, where we're parents. We got to take care of our own kids. We can't let anyone else raise them.
I was going to say, who's the third-party candidate you're not telling us about?
Oh, there's a few right now. But when I watch football, and now I've got a 7-year-old who's learning football with me, there is so many gambling ads. Mm-hmm. And then the question is, what is that? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And like I wrestle with, should I explain it?
Yeah.
Is that something I even want him to learn? Obviously, when he's of age, like you make your own decisions. Hopefully I'll teach him right and wrong. but it's just so in your face, which was never the case. Like gambling was never, it was around football. It's now in football. Now, I'm not saying you're doing it as a broadcaster because the broadcasters still aren't really talking about it, but we get those odds after every commercial break.
Yeah. No, I mean, they come up all the time. Look, I think Al Michaels is the only one that can actually inject it into a broadcast and get away with it, but it's there, right? All of us endorse something or another, right? As radio host, as TV host, everybody is on the train.
Yeah, no, I'm doing it too, right?
How it makes economic sense for these companies, I have no idea, but they spend a lot of money trying to get the next dollar. A lot of money.
And now the league's involved. And
Yes.
for many, many years, and it's world famous that Goodell said, basically, we would never do this. We never want to get involved in gambling. And his excuse now for why they've decided to do it is because the Supreme Court obviously basically announced a decade ago, yeah, we're going to allow states to legalize it if they so choose. And now we're at the point where how many states have legalized sports gambling? 35 states, 36 states?
35, 36, something like that.
Somewhere in that number. And so the NFL's decision was, you know what? Screw it. Let's just make money off of it.
Yep.
And with that comes a lot of rules and concerns. We'll go through some of the rules because it's fascinating about what's out there in Vegas this weekend, getting ready for the Super Bowl, and plus more on this game. And one thing we never found out yesterday, which I am fascinated to find out today, is what the hell's Tiki doing during the Super Bowl? We found out last week that during one of the playoff games, you were on like a Peloton bike.
I was on a treadmill.
He was on a treadmill.
10 miles on a treadmill.
10 miles on a treadmill. 10 miles on a treadmill during a football game. Does that mean he does 30 miles during the Super Bowl? We'll find out. Plus more of your calls, 877-337-6666.